In a dimly lit apartment, lying above a busy city street, a man named Elias lived his days in quiet exhaustion. On the surface, nothing seemed wrong with his life. He had a job that paid enough, friends who liked him, and a family that wished him well. But deep inside, something was broken. Elias felt as though he was drowning in expectations. The pressure to succeed, to be admired, to stay positive, to avoid mistakes, to always say the right thing, and especially to never disappoint anyone. Every decision felt heavy, every emotion overwhelming. It was as if he carried an invisible backpack filled with stones, and each stone was a worry he never chose but somehow felt obligated to carry. One night, after a particularly draining day at work, Elias returned home feeling completely defeated. He collapsed onto his couch, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. Every post seemed to be a reminder of how much he lacked. People traveling, people succeeding, people becoming happier, richer, fitter, freer. The more he scrolled, the worse he felt. His inner voice whispered one painful sentence: "Everyone is doing better than you." That's when his eyes landed on a bright orange book lying on his coffee table. He had purchased it months ago, but never opened it. The title alone felt like a slap across the face: The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Elias picked it up slowly, almost hesitantly, as if the book might judge him. But the moment he opened the first page, it felt like he had stepped into another person's mind, a mind that understood exactly what he was going through. The book began not with promises of positivity or empty motivational slogans, but with the story of a man who embraced his flaws, Charles Bukowski, the famously crude and self-deprecating writer. Bukowski had failed at nearly everything in life before becoming successful. But Mark Manson, the author of the book, insisted that Bukowski didn't succeed because he became amazing. He succeeded because he stopped pretending to be something he wasn't. Bukowski accepted himself, his flaws, his laziness, his drinking, his failures. He didn't try to be a hero. He simply wrote what he believed, unapologetically. Elias paused as he read this story. All his life he had been told to be positive, to work harder, to believe in himself constantly, to never show weakness. But here was a man who did the opposite, and it worked. It felt like Mark was whispering to him, "You don't need to give a fuck about everything. You only need to care about the right things." As Elias turned the page, the book revealed a truth so simple and yet so powerful. Life is limited, including how much we can care. Our time, energy, and emotions are finite. Mark compared human attention to coins in a small purse. You only have so many coins, and if you spend them on meaningless things, you'll have nothing left for what truly matters. And that was the first moment Elias realized something profound. He had been spending emotional coins on everything. On comments from strangers, on imagined failures, on fear of judgment, on minor inconveniences. He had been bankrupting himself emotionally without even noticing. The more he read, the more he began to recognize the trap he had been living in. Mark called it the feedback loop from hell. It occurs when a person feels bad about feeling bad, anxious about being anxious, guilty for being sad, ashamed of being insecure. Elias recognized this loop intimately. Whenever he felt unhappy, he felt like a failure. Whenever he made a mistake, he hated himself for it. He had been spiraling for years. Mark's tone throughout the book was raw, direct, sometimes even crude, but it was honest in a way that Elias had rarely encountered. Instead of promising that life would be easy, Mark insisted that life would always contain suffering, and the key was to choose your suffering. You could suffer the pain of discipline or the pain of regret, the pain of responsibility or the pain of avoidance, the pain of limits or the pain of chaos. But pain, Mark said, is not the enemy. Meaningful pain is the path to a meaningful life. Elias read slowly, absorbing each insight like a thirsty man drinking water. Mark explained that many people chase happiness directly, trying to force positivity, chasing admiration, seeking validation, but this pursuit only makes happiness more elusive. Happiness, Mark insisted, emerges naturally when one focuses on solving meaningful problems. The trick was not to eliminate problems, but to choose better problems. Life is a series of problems. Solving them creates growth. As Elias continued reading, he stumbled upon a chapter that challenged him deeply, the chapter about responsibility. Mark argued that even if something is not your fault, you are still responsible for how you interpret it and how you respond. Responsibility isn't about blame, it's about power. When you claim responsibility for your thoughts, reactions, and choices, you regain control over your life. Mark illustrated this through the story of a man who lost his eyesight in a war. Despite not being at fault, he chose to rebuild his life, learn new skills, and find meaning through helping others. It was this act of responsibility, not avoidance, that gave him strength. Elias felt a knot forming in his chest. For years, he had blamed circumstances, his childhood, his job, his bosses, society, even luck. He had been waiting for life to treat him kindly before he allowed himself to grow. But now he saw how this mindset had trapped him. He realized he had the power to assign meaning to every experience, good or bad, and that responsibility was not a burden, but a form of liberation. Then came the chapters about values, perhaps the most transformative for Elias. Mark argued that we often hold terrible values without even realizing it. Values like being admired, being always right, being superior, being positive all the time, or never failing, are recipes for misery, because they depend on external results or impossibly high standards. Good values, on the other hand, are internal, controllable, and life-enhancing: honesty, courage, perseverance, generosity. Elias imagined his emotional backpack again, but this time he saw the labels clearly. One stone said approval, another said comparison, a third said perfection. He realized how heavy these stones had been and how little they had given him in return. Slowly, in his imagination, he began setting each stone down. As the night deepened, Elias reached a chapter that felt like it was written for him, the lesson about saying no. Mark argued that boundaries are essential for a meaningful life. Many people say yes to everything because they want to avoid conflict or earn validation, but in doing so, they lose themselves. Mark insisted that a strong identity is built by learning what to reject, not what to accept. Every meaningful life is defined by clear boundaries, what you will tolerate and what you will not.
Elias remembered countless moments when he agreed to things he didn't want to do. Times when he let people walk over his time and energy because he feared upsetting them. Times when he chose pleasing others over respecting himself. And it hit him. Saying yes to everyone had forced him to say no to himself.
Yet the most powerful moment was still waiting, the chapter about death. Mark wrote about losing his friend Josh at a young age. The suddenness, the shock, the grief, it all carved a deep wound in Mark's life. But over time, that wound became a source of clarity. Death strips away the illusions we cling to. It reminds us that life is short, fragile, and unpredictable. And in that fragility lies urgency. The urgency to live meaningfully, to choose wisely, to stop wasting emotional energy on the trivial. As Elias read those lines, he felt an overwhelming stillness. The fears that controlled him, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of judgment, all seemed small compared to the reality of mortality. One day, all of this would end. One day, none of the things he worried about would matter. The realization did not frighten him, instead it calmed him. He felt his priorities shift gently into place. By the time he reached the final pages, Elias felt as though something inside him had silently rearranged itself. Mark's challenge echoed in his mind. If you stopped trying to care about everything, what would you finally have room to care about? It was a question that demanded courage, clarity, and self-honesty. Elias closed the book and leaned back, listening to the distant hum of the city below his window. For the first time in years, his mind felt quiet. The world had not changed, but the way he saw it had. He realized he didn't need to solve everything, fix everyone, or control the uncontrollable. He only needed to choose wisely, to care deeply about a few meaningful things, and to let the rest fall away, unworthy of his precious, limited attention.
And so, as dawn approached and the first light filtered through the curtains, Elias felt lighter, not because his problems had disappeared, but because he finally understood which problems were worth solving. He understood that peace is not found in caring less, but in caring better. And in that quiet understanding, he took his first genuine step toward freedom.